Zach. Are you there and able to hear us? There we go.
There we go.
Zach, thanks so much for joining us. I'm sorry I asked you if you were there and then ruined your delightful sting with your fancy name animation and what have you. But the important thing is you're here and you're ready to chat. Thanks so much for making time to chat.
Yeah, of course. And you got my name right the first time, which is just amazing within itself.
I don't know. I feel like I took a run up at it and didn't necessarily clear it the first time, but we got there in the end. But yeah, it's so nice of you to come and talk to us, particularly about the work that's been happening on Gremlin.com and around like the Gremlin organization. Maybe a good place to start in case people didn't take a look already or aren't familiar with Gremlin. Maybe that's a good place just to kick off the conversation. You could just tell us a tiny bit about what Gremlin is and what the kind of things are that you do.
Sure. So Gremlin is a SaaS platform for chaos engineering. And what is chaos engineering? Great question. That is the concept that was developed at companies like Amazon and Netflix, where any amount of downtime or disruption in their service would have a huge impact on the large number of customers they had. The teams there found the only way to ensure their systems could withstand all the different ways that could break was to purposely and proactively inject failure into their system so they could code against those things. And what Gremlin does is provide a toolkit that allows teams working in that cloud-based system to run those attacks and be more resilient against those types of failures. And my job is building Gremlin.com, and I also work within our web application.
Nice. So you're based in North Carolina?
I am. The North Carolina mountains, a very small town out here.
Right. Excellent. And so where are the team based? Are you based is there a large team? Are you distributed, or are you all based there?
So our team consists of 3 engineers across the web app and Gremlin.com. We're spread all throughout the country, and we're distributed, and it works very well. It's really important for us to choose tools that allow us to have more autonomous workflows with the ability to be cross-functional as needs arise. So choosing those technologies we can share across both of those web properties, Gremlin.com and the app, is very important to us.
Okay, excellent. And so it's interesting you mentioned Gremlin.com and the app as things that are under your kind of your purview. Maybe that's a good chance then just to talk a little bit about what are your main web properties or things you're building with web technologies, and what do they do? I was rambling on earlier today about kind of functional requirements, so it'd be good to kind of understand maybe what the things you're building for the web do and what they're for.
Sure. Yeah. So first, Gremlin.com, that is our marketing platform where both our website and product documentation live. The website is used to create a variety of brand experiences and is also used as an educational platform for chaos engineering. Our docs are there to provide customers with product guides on how to use Gremlin more efficiently. Secondly is our web application, and customers use that to run attacks, analyze results, and view the status of all the various features that Gremlin provides. And then lastly, we also have some storybook instances. They provide living user interface documentation that allow our engineers to create and validate features quickly, and also work very closely with designers for feedback.
Wow, so that's quite a variety of things. Are you using the same tools and technologies across all of those, or have you chosen some to fit your needs differently? How's that evolved over time? What are you using there?
Yeah, so with 3 engineers across both teams, we definitely want to have a solid foundation for both, or for all of those platforms. And React has been our main foundational technology for those. We chose React for its ability to manage data flow and respond to changes in the UI as quickly as possible. For Gremlin.com, we're using Gatsby, which is a framework built on top of React. That provides us server-side rendering and GraphQL as a data layer. Aside from that, we're also using a number of Netlify Netlify services to really enhance our Jamstack experience. First is functions. This enables us to create our own endpoints. We write those in Node just because it pairs very well with JavaScript. And we write those endpoints that might require authentication or that have to work with complex data sets. Example functions that we include are things like interacting with the Pingdom API, so we can have a status endpoint on our site. Another endpoint listens for callbacks from the AWS Marketplace, so we can automate signups within our product. And then we even wrote a small ping service that we use to validate our own product inside of our web app called status checks. So we certainly try to use functions for a variety of cases, both marketing and for our web application.
Nice. So you're using serverless functions to build out APIs that could be doing all kinds of things. Is that the same team building those things out, or are there different people responsible for that? It feels like superpowers if you're building out APIs as well.
Yeah, definitely. The challenge that we faced in the past was wanting to create these endpoints that had to deal with things like authentication that you wouldn't want to expose on the web. That always required a different team, a backend team. But with Netlify functions, it's rolled into both local development and the production deploys so well that we can work with the same very familiar technologies, and they're automatically exposed on the web for us to ingest and use. So it's enabled our team to build things at a speed that certainly rivals anything we were able to do in the past.
That's great. I like that a lot. How did you choose the individual technology? I mean, you talked about using Gatsby and you talked about using React. I mean, the development team that were working on this before, or working on this, were they particular fans of those technologies, or did they learn about those in order to work on the projects? How did that all kind of come about?
Yeah, so our web application is very interactive. It pulls a backend to feed real-time results, so our customers know what's going on with their product. So we had used other technologies in the past that got us there, but there was always a little bit of a rift between having something that was performant and easy enough to onboard new engineers for. When it came to choosing something for the website, we wanted to marry those technologies as closely as possible. And that's why Gatsby certainly became a first-class citizen at Gremlin, because it allows us to use those same foundationals, share a lot of technologies between the two projects, and ultimately have a website that's exported, that's server-side rendered, and that's performant. We get questions all the time about why is it so fast? And it's because of all the great open source technologies that we're able to take advantage of.
What a wonderful support ticket to get. Can you explain why the site is too fast for us? That's one of those good problems. But yeah, I mean, you're quite right to kind of call out the fact that there are all of these wonderful open source projects. And I saw some conversation in the chat earlier on about, how Jamstack will change open source. I kind of feel like Jamstack has benefited hugely from open source, and the kind of tools that we get to use are the kind of fruits of all of a flourishing kind of open source ecosystem. It sounds like you're using quite a few things that are either open source or had a very kind of approachable on-ramp to get using.
Yeah, and the documentation for all of these open source projects have enabled myself and the rest of Gremlin to contribute back to open source. It is a community, and there was a particular feature that I needed. It wasn't available, but I was able to use the documentation to write my own. It's open source, it's on NPM, and others can use it and seem to enjoy it. So it feels great to have such a strong support system, like I mentioned, to build these tools, but to be able to contribute back just makes you feel more part of the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm always curious as well. I've worked in a few different kind of agencies and a few different teams in agencies, and we always used to see, I felt like we were always kind of reinventing our processes to try and do things better, and not always nailing it. I'll be very honest. We haven't always nailed it, but I'm always curious about how development teams are organized in terms of, their development workflow and how they kind of make things visible to stakeholders and all of those kind of things. Could you maybe talk about how that kind of works at Gremlin?
Sure. So we use GitHub for our code repositories, and with Netlify, we leverage branch deploys for staging and for feature building. That enables us to have a much more efficient review process with the ability to share across the entire organization. No more of this, pull down these random files from an FTP server, run this command and hope for the best. We can get real-time feedback, push up updates. and have secure URLs that we can share wherever we need to. Our setup process for our front end is also, I feel very fortunate for that. We can onboard new engineers and we can spin up local servers for testing, pull requests or working on our own work in a matter of seconds. It's very well combined into one well-oiled machine there.
Right. Yeah, that seems like something that was just such a foreign concept to me a few years ago. The idea of being able to particularly onboard new developers and say, okay, clone this repo, the README has some commands, follow those and you'll have a local build running and you can start being productive quickly. That seems like something I could never be without anymore. And it feels like a huge, well, it started off as a luxury, but now I guess it's starting to feel like table stakes for web development kind of environments. But yeah, it's super, super powerful. And also the idea of having shareable URLs for people to see things. I could never go back.
Yeah, definitely.
So in terms of that kind of workflow, has that been the same across each of the projects? Have you had like consistency across all of the projects, or is that iterated over time as you've, okay, we're doing a new project now, we need a different way of working there? Or has it kind of led you to conventions that you just build on more and more?
I 100% agree that the convention part of things has become a big part of our workflow. Even when we're approaching building new features, just as any web development team would do, we're always looking for ways to make our existing infrastructure work better, make it more flexible, write more tests for it, make sure that it's solid enough to grow with the business. Because we want to make sure that the old adage of coming back 3-6 months after you push something live, you still want to be proud of it and still be able to work with it. So
right.
Being able to have React behind the scenes and Gatsby, that certainly enables that for us.
Right. How do you, can I ask a little bit about content editing as well, content authoring? Because again, earlier on in the day, there's some conversations about how content gets authored and managed and what have you. Who is managing content on your various sites and applications? Is that a completely separate team, or is that part of the same team? How does that all fit together?
Yeah, well, I will tell you how it was in the past.
Okay.
For updating content on Gremlin.com, that was always a developer-driven effort. There was no source file, there were no databases. We always like to have that static end site at the end of the day, but the build process that we had previously, which was using Gulp to handle our CSS, our JavaScript, our handlebars templates for anyone that remembers those, updating content was a struggle. So along with trying to have React as the base foundation for the web app and Gremlin.com, we wanted to solve how people contribute to the website as well. So we use an open source project that Netlify made called Netlify Cms. And what's great about that for us is it uses GitHub login credentials, where it's a customized dashboard that has all of our source files. All of those are in markdown files, whether it's a blog post, documentation, article, tutorial, and it provides an interface for really anyone in the company to go in, have a nice WYSIWYG editor or any other type of content construction field that we need. And then that ultimately pushes a PR up to GitHub. We have a dedicated team that will go in and review to make sure that our style guides are met for content writing and any other quality control checks we want to do. And we then give the author of those pull requests the power to push that live. And within just a couple of minutes, it's live on the site. So it's cut down the amount of time it takes to make content updates considerably. And it also frees up everyone else's time that was normally dealing with those to work on other things.
Right. And so that's a kind of a motivation that I keep on coming back to when people talk about, I don't know, like this whole thing of decoupling and saying, oh, you don't need infrastructure teams to be working on these pieces now. I think there's always a temptation to then say, wait a minute, are you saying that infrastructure teams are no longer necessary, or this team is no longer necessary? And I think you kind of mention a phrase that I really like there. It's like it freed them up to work on other things. So, whatever those disciplines are, if you can make some of the aspects of the work kind of a commodity, then it means that those people can go off and just be more productive on things that make your site different to others, and kind of I don't know, work on the craft and the finesse that is not a commodity, which is the experience, the content, and what you have on the site. So I don't know, I love that sentiment.
Yeah, and the complexity is always there, but we depend on services like Netlify to mask that, so we can focus on the things that we feel we can do efficiently. Just as if you were to draw a parallel with robots on an automation line, there will still always be people needed to fill those roles. But if we can depend on something like Netlify to handle all the hard work for us, we can focus on those other things.
Right. It doesn't sound like there's any shortage of engineering work that needs to be happening in Gremlin. It's just not all of it lives at the front end of the website.
Definitely.
Yeah. You mentioned testing as well earlier on, and I haven't talked to you before about that, but is testing part of the build, or is that something you do separately, or is another part of like your QA process? How does that kind of fit into the world?
Yeah, so testing for us is around, just both visually testing something, but we also have tests that run via a package called Cypress. That allows us to interact with our APIs, so we can depend for certain things to either be in the DOM or be available to click, and we can respond and understand if our UI is working as it should. And when working with technologies like React, where we have components shared across our entire stack, I want to make sure that something I touch in one file that might be reused in 10 others is not going to be impacted based on a change I make in that original file. So tools like Cypress, Jest, for example, all of those things are very important to us to make sure that the code that we're pushing out is of quality, and that we're not introducing failure into a system that should be reliable, because we're a reliability company.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's nowhere to hide, is there, for you in your line of business? And yeah, and even though with like a Jamstack model, it becomes easier to roll things back if there are errors. If there is something that gets deployed that's a problem. Of course, you never want those things to get out into production in the first place. So having the ability to roll in those kind of the integration testing and various other types of testing into your process seems like it's kind of key. It always felt like that was a difficult problem to solve consistently when I was working on other different types of projects, but it sounds like you've got that kind of down.
Yeah, and in addition to our Cypress and our visual testing that we're doing with our feature branches, another added benefit of using Gatsby is because it has its GraphQL layer built in. If I'm trying to query the file system for a certain file or expect something to be in a certain location, Netlify runs our build to actually generate the static version of our site on Netlify's side, and Gatsby just won't build if there's an error. So that means that for Gremlin.com, I have to try really hard to push a bug to production. There's many different fail safes along the way that help prevent those things from happening. So that's another benefit, is it's taking all of your source files, you're querying it and filtering it and sorting and all these kind of really cool things within your site. But ultimately, Gatsby and Netlify are going to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do before it's out there.
It's becoming clear to me why you work at a chaos engineering company when you're saying things like, I have to work really hard to push a bug to production. I love that it's become your mission. I'm conscious that we've only got a couple of minutes left, really. But are there any other, maybe a kind of closing question is that, are there any other things about building for the web or building out your sites that we haven't talked about that might have been difficult before that adopting a Jamstack architecture has helped to solve? We've probably covered a lot of them along the way already, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, introducing the Jamstack for us has pushed down a lot of barriers from what we thought a website could be. Certainly when I first started working on the web, it was Joomla and Drupal and WordPress. There were always some issues to get around. And when we moved to having a static version of our site, we felt that we lost some of that configurability to do these really cool things that we wanted to do. But with things like, Netlify functions, I didn't even talk about forms. To touch on that real quick, we used Netlify's form project. We wanted a form handler that wouldn't get in the way, that wouldn't have its own dependencies built in, so we could have these unique experiences on our own. All of these things that you would think require a backend or require buy-in across the board, just as in the previous talk, you can iteratively move to Jamstack. And I think that, wherever possible, reusing technologies across the company is always going to be a benefit. We're always pushing for more collaboration. And I think that if you can isolate those one-offs, it's going to make things even more enjoyable to work with.
Awesome. That's probably a great place to leave it. Zach, thanks so much for spending the time with us. I'm really grateful that you come and chat and let us take a peek into what's been going on at gremlin.com.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Great stuff. Everyone, give your thanks to Zach. Put it in the chat as we let him get on with his no doubt busy day. Thanks so much, Zach. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.